Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on AI and revolutionizing space and occupancy planning with Brian Haines. My name is Corey Marshall, and I'm a campaign marketing manager here at Johnson Controls. We're excited to have you join us today. Before I hand it over to Brian, we're just going to cover a few of the quick interactive tools that you have available to you. They're all on the right-hand side of your screen. We have chat, Q&A, and polls. We are going to kick things off with a poll so I can show you how that works right away. And while I'm talking, I would like you to go ahead and answer that poll for us. And then Brian will talk about those results. We also have the chat feature. So if you have any questions today, go ahead and add them to the chat. That will go to everybody in the audience, including myself and Brian. If you have specific questions that you would like Brian to answer, go ahead and add those to the Q&A. If we don't get to them today, we will follow up with you with those answers. We are recording today's session, and we'll get that out to you once it's available. And with that, I think we're ready to get started. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Corey. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that I'm absolutely fascinated by and spending a tremendous amount of time thinking about, as well as trying out myself. And it's really going to be focusing on how AI is revolutionizing space and occupancy planning. And I'll be a little bit more clear about how I think about this topic as we go through the slides. I'm not going to be doing any sort of software demonstrations or anything like that. I will talk a little bit about some solutions that we have, but mostly I'm going to talk about why right now is the time to get on board. I mean, honestly, when you go to a lot of conferences and you speak a lot like I do, there's sort of a theme every year. Last year, 2 years ago, it was hybrid workplace. Every event, every person presenting was presenting that. Last year it was return to work. This year it was AI. I presented this presentation at World Workplace this year, and there's a tremendous amount of conversation happening. Just backing up just a little bit about me. Won't spend too much time on this, but I've been in software related to the building industry and optimizing the building experience for close to 30 years now. I am an active member of many of our communities, such as IFMA, and where I'm a member of the Technology Council. Also, I'm a global influencer, but also participate in a number of industry associations. I started my career, really, my first professional job in facilities management was as a space and occupancy planner at the University of Arizona. So I've been on both sides of the fence when it comes to this topic, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience, as well as what I think we need to be doing as space and occupancy planning professionals right now, so that we have a leg up on our careers as we move forward, because this is happening super fast. There's a lot of evolutions that happen over time, at least over my long career in terms of buildings. And you look at a lot of things like the transition from hand-drawn drawings. Literally at the beginning of my career, people were still drawing, with pencil and paper, drawing floor plans and drawing building sections. Then there was sort of the CAD revolution in the early, late 80s, early 90s. We really started to see, especially in the early 90s, mid 90s, we started to see really wide adoption of things like CAD technologies. It evolutionized our industry because it made the production and reproduction of drawings incredibly accurate and fast. And everyone got on board because they could see that value very fast. Then the internet came along. The Netscape Navigator, I think, really kind of cracked that egg in the mid 90s. And we had sort of the dot-com boom. On the heels of that, around 2007, we had Apple introducing the iPhone, which made us all suddenly mobile. There's a lot of things that have evolutionized and revolutionized where we're going as a building industry. From a Johnson Controls perspective and from a market perspective, we're seeing something really interesting happen right now. And I'm going to talk about why AI is so imperative at this moment in terms of enabling this sort of big change that I'm seeing. One is that most of the buildings in the world are what we call legacy buildings. And I would say 99% of the building stock on the planet are typically older buildings, buildings that don't have a lot of smart technology in them. I usually do this kind of presentation at a convention center or at a hotel, maybe in a conference, in a boardroom or a conference room, maybe in a ballroom. And it's, I usually get to pick on the building. Like I could call it out. I could say, this building's not very smart. It doesn't know anything about who's in this room, how much energy is being used. It doesn't, even the building owner probably doesn't know that. The truth is, I'm now in the headquarters, our Raleigh headquarters, and this space is so sensorized. It's amazing. We have literally everywhere I look, there's a sensor that measuring the performance of this facility, either from a utilization standpoint, from an indoor air quality standpoint. And these are technologies that were actually quite easy to deploy here. So keep in mind, most of our buildings really not very smart, although they're sitting there and they're using massive amounts of energy and they're open, all the time. We're cleaning these buildings. We're doing a lot of things with these buildings. And if we were just using some technology to really help us better operate those buildings, reduce costs, et cetera, would that be amazing? All right. So then the next category to the right there, we've got connected buildings. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I will tell you where we sit right now with some of the best buildings in the world. The buildings that are being built right now are really in that smart buildings category. I know a lot of them. There's the new JP Morgan Chase headquarters in downtown New York City, probably one of the smartest skyscrapers in the world. There's buildings around the world being built with these smart technologies. They're highly connected, and at their core, they're using automated building control systems, using AI to process massive amounts of information to make these buildings highly responsive to workplace experience or occupant experience. In other words, providing a better experience for people going in and out of the building, while also providing a better experience for those who own the buildings, reduced energy costs, reduced efficiency, better experience of the people coming and going. Ultimately, when we start to apply something like artificial intelligence to the massive amounts of data that buildings are starting to produce, we have an opportunity to create autonomous buildings. And I can tell you the industry as a whole is really shooting for this. This is where buildings, I like to use this term, where buildings start to become our partners instead of our problems. If you can imagine in the not so distant future, you can actually do this right now in a lot of ways, but you're basically Captain Kirk and you're in charge of the Starship Enterprise, and you're speaking to the ship, and the ship gives you answers and responds. We can do that now through natural language querying and using AI to get, to have the ability to be able to get information out and control our buildings in a more autonomous fashion. Now, this is going to go really far in the next 5 to 10 years, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. I really want to talk about the way AI is kind of enabling that. So the AI revolution is in full tilt right now. When you look at the adoption curves of technologies over the year, it sort of starts slow. We've got early adopters. We're past that point. We're at mainstream. And I'll tell you why we're at mainstream, and you may not even have noticed. We've been using, let's say, tools such as web browser-based querying, using things like Google for years, right? Well, Google will get a list of results that are links that you can click on to go find information that you're looking for. And that's mixed with ads and all sorts of things. I don't know if you noticed, but sometime this summer, we saw AI take over as the #1 search mechanism in the world. And it's beating out traditional Google searching. And that's, if you've not, I know you've seen it. You go and you type something into Chrome or whatever browser you're using, and you're getting this AI response at the top that's in natural language. It sounds like a human's talking to you. It's giving you fairly well thought out answers, and it cites all of the sources. That's AI and its power. And what I mean by sort of rapid adoption or being in that sort of, that mode where we're all starting to use it, it's because you're not even noticing that you're using it. It's not impeding your day. It's making your day better. And I think it's fascinating because we're seeing this happen right now. Here's some statistics. Gartner predicts that by 2028, 33% of enterprise software is going to have what's called Agentic AI. I'm not going to go into that too much, but Agentic AI is essentially agents. That's what Agentic stands for, that are built on AI technology, learn over time, and they get better and more refined. We often encourage anyone who's using an AI-based technology, especially when you're getting results, to proofread the results, because those algorithms are learning every day, but they're not perfect. So make sure you're proofreading. I recommend going to use a freely available tool like ChatGPT if you haven't tried it out, or Copilot from Microsoft. They're revolutionizing the way I work. I use them every single day now. And as a space and occupancy planner and someone who's just dipping their toe into AI, get a free account and try it. It's going to make you better at what you do. It's going to put information at your fingertips in a way that you've never imagined. And it's available to you now. The reason it's estimated that 15% of day-to-day decisions in smart buildings will be made autonomously by 2028. Line that up with the 33% of enterprise software using this technology. And then 85% of enterprises are expected to implement AI agents by the end of 2025. We're almost there. We're 6 weeks, 7 weeks from the end of 2025 already. And this is the absolute case. We get asked about this every single day. It's already available in customer service. Most of the time now, when you're using a chatbot on a website, it's probably AI based. It sounds like you're talking to a human. You can be convinced that you're talking to a human, but for the most part, it's probably customer service being provided by bots that are learning and getting smarter. They're understanding what people are asking. They're refining their answers, and it's getting so much better. No longer do you have you ask a question and the response is, I don't understand what you're asking, or press 1 for assistance, press 2 to go to sales. Those days are gone. We have conversational AI being used across all types of technologies already, and I'll guarantee you're using it, and a lot of times you might not even know. Software development, it's really revolutionizing the way companies like Johnson Controls build software. Not only is it helping us build code faster, but we're embedding this AI capabilities in our code to provide amazing insights from massive data sets. Banking, supply chain management, healthcare, all of these industries rapidly utilizing AI and the solutions that they provide to you every single day. And really what this means to the facilities management market, I talk about this quite often because I have a lot of people ask me at conferences, is this going to be like a risk for my job as a space and occupancy planner or as a facilities professional? And the answer is really, it's not yes or no. It's, in my opinion is anytime you stand still in your career as your industry is moving forward and you don't move forward with it, you always place yourself at risk. I don't know a lot of organizations right now in this particular market right now that are hiring a lot of facilities professionals. As a matter of fact, we've seen a number of things. We've seen a lot of people with a lot of information, are aging out of our profession. They're taking that information with them. They're not getting backfilled nearly as quickly. So what we need is help, right? And the help is coming in the way of being able to use things like AI. Now, some of the possible scenarios, I'm not going to go into this too much because we've only got 30 or so minutes for this webcast. But think of it this way. AI is going to be able to offload some of your research. You're going to be able to offload, you're going to be able to ask a question and it's going to go do a tremendous amount of research and provide you answers very quickly. If the AI algorithms are pointed at the data that you have in one of your systems, let's say it's an IWMS or a space management system, you're going to be able to get really, really insightful answers out of the systems that you already have in place with the data that you've curated over years using AI. In the past, in the not so distant past, you would have had to invoke somebody, maybe an analyst, or you would have had to learn how to write things like SQL queries. And I'm not going to explain that, but it's, build reports. Those reports are instantaneous with AI. I believe AI will be the death of the dashboard. And what I mean by that is I love dashboards and solutions. They're beautiful. They provide you a lot of insights. If you're really a heavy duty expert, you can understand what those bars, charts, and graphs and everything stands for. But if you can just ask and get a question back like a human would answer, that's in a highly reliable way, that's going to be the way we're interacting with software into the future. So in terms of space planning, are we seeing an evolution or a revolution? I love to show this slide because this is data that we've been tracking since 2019. And I've been following this. I've seen this chart built out from day one because I'm fascinated by it. One of the things that we realized, and we use sensor data mostly to get this, and it's a couple of million square feet of space, global real estate all over the world. And we've been looking at the same real estate, how it's being utilized. And what we found early on was that most buildings were not nearly as utilized as most of us thought. Before the pandemic, over on the left-hand side, we're looking at, 45%-ish, 40 to 45% was fairly typical for the utilization of a building. That means more than 50% of the time the building's not utilized. And that, I'm just talking, you can break this down by working hours, 24 hours a day, X number of days a week, however you want to look at it. What's interesting is that all of those thousands and thousands of sensors that we had looking instantly caught COVID, or they caught the COVID change in terms of the way we're using it. They didn't get COVID. They basically saw instantly that the world went home, right? And we dropped to below. We ultimately dropped by January 21 down to about 3% global utilization as we were all hunkered down, and we've never recovered. This is because these sensors, which are feeding the systems like the one I'm showing you right now, never sleep. They never take vacation. They're never off. They're just monitoring. And they're monitoring at the millisecond level, and they're reporting. So they know when someone's there and someone isn't. It's not humans standing on a floor doing bed checks the way we used to as space planners. And, at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, I want to go up to the floor and see who's sitting where so I can understand how it's being used. Those days are over. This monitoring is happening real time. And what we found out was that we never recovered. And we still have not recovered to pre-pandemic levels in terms of the way our buildings are being used. And I see that as opportunity. And I'll talk about the way AI is going to help us with that. Now, when you remove Monday and Friday, utilization starts to look more like pre-pandemic utilization. Still not quite there, but it does come up fairly significantly. Fridays are days in a lot of organizations, and I don't care what your return to work policy is. I don't care if you're 4-day, 5-day, it is still low. The sensors and all of the systems that we're feeding, Wi-Fi data, we're using sensor data, we're using area counters, we're using flow counters, people coming in and out of buildings, millions and millions of pieces of information going into these systems, and they're telling us that we are still far underutilizing what we have. Opportunity for space and occupancy planners, opportunity for organizations to optimize their real estate in different ways. So traditional space planning, this is back. Well, I was going to say it's back when I was a space planner, but I still see it done this way a lot. We're looking at things like space type and use, classification of space, adjacencies, marketing department next to sales, assigned versus unassigned, reservable, blocking and stacking, all of those things that we really needed to be able to do in terms of a traditional space planner started to change. Whoops, I don't know why that's going forward. All right. My opinion is utilization has largely been solved. There's a lot of solutions on the market. Johnson Controls has a beautiful one called Insights. We've got our own sensors, but there's other solutions on the planet. The question you need to ask yourself is, what level of accuracy are you looking for? Where do you want to deploy it? And what you want to do with that data. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So there's room booking that can tell you how your space is being used. There's flow counters. In other words, they're just counting the people coming in and out. Geo tracking using things like your phone. Desk booking instead of room booking. Room booking is more like conference rooms. Desk booking is like work points, workstations. Light sensors. Anytime you walk into your office and the light automatically comes on, it's because there's a sensor there and it realizes there's an occupant. You can actually get that data in a lot of these systems to do some super, rough understanding of utilization. Work point sensors, those are the kind that go under the desk, badging, assets. All of this is telling us a tremendous amount of information about how space is being used. And we have figured that out as an industry. There's a lot of solutions out there. Like I said, we've got one of them, but there are solutions that can tell you. I think it's interesting. I think utilization is interesting, but to me, utilization is only interesting when I look at it in regards to all other facilities and real estate operations. In other words, if I have a building that's 10% utilized and I have another building that's 50% utilized, does it matter or doesn't it matter? It really matters in a lot of different ways if you if you think it matters, right? Are you okay with having a lot of real estate that you're heating and conditioning and spending money on that no one's using, or not? I often dig into this a little bit, because if that building that's being utilized 10%, let's say you're a corporate customer or client, you work for a corporation, and that corporation has been around for 100 years, and that building in New York is being utilized at 10%. It's a terrible old office building. It's been sitting there forever, and everybody wonders why we don't just get rid of it. And you realize, you look at the history of your company, and you realize that it's where your founder started the company. It's an iconic building that's on your logo. There's really a lot of things that need to be taken into account as we look at real estate as planners, figuring out what's important and what's not. And I think utilization is an interesting one, because if I have two identical buildings and neither one of them is more important than the other, and one's costing me $10 million to operate, or they're both costing me $10 million to operate, and one's utilized 10% and one's utilized 50%, one of those buildings has now suddenly become a lot more important to me, because I probably don't need the building that's 10% utilized. I can get rid of it. I can maybe reduce my footprint. Maybe I can sublease, but really it's about bringing my operational cost down based upon that knowledge. So the emergence of smart building technology, I'm going to make sure I stay on time here. What's really moving this along? There's a lot of things. One is, when I first started seeing sensors come along that were the kinds of sensors we could stick on and do research about how our facilities were being used, 10 years ago, maybe around 2015, the batteries in those devices lasted about 2 weeks. We now have battery life in the devices that we could just simply stick on, or maybe low power devices like PoE or power over Ethernet. And those same sensors, which are now better, they perform the same function either for utilization or maybe indoor air quality, can last 5 or 10 years. Now they've become a much less of a maintenance problem, because they've got life expectancy that allows me to not only look at space, but over really long periods of time, and the maintenance and upkeep on those has actually been reduced heavily. Connectivity options, it's really easy to connect these devices. Broader acceptance, what we're seeing is less of a focus on, I believe you need to have a strong HR policy if you're going to put this kinds of technology in to measure the utilization of your space. Talk to HR, make sure you have a policy. People get nervous when they see something suddenly appear on the ceiling above their desk or under their desk. You don't want to make them think they're being spied on. You simply need to tell them what we're doing is measuring how well we're using our space, so that we can provide space back to you that's better. And you can do this in a really broad, massive way, far beyond what humans are capable of, and using technologies like data warehouses and AI can provide those insights. And then connected systems. It's now much easier to take this data that's coming from these sensors and connect it to a lot of things. One of the best use cases, really simple, is if no one's in this room, turn the lights off, or don't condition the space if no one's going to be in on a Saturday. Don't clean all of your offices if only 10% of them are used. There's a lot of ways you can take this technology to power downstream processes in ways that are going to make you a lot more efficient. This is an example of one of our buildings. It's our engineering lab on our U.S. headquarters up near Milwaukee. And this tells you the power of sensorization and being able to use a lot of this data. Now, on the back end of this, we have an AI engine that allows me to be able to ask questions. And we've been able to gain a lot of insights, even on our own facilities. This is showing you live occupancy on a floor, but we can also see it over time. One of the ones that's really interesting is that there's a conference room here that was recently occupied. What we found out about that is that conference room, even though it has a capacity of 6, usually has a utilization of 1. It's because there's a lot of workstations here, and it can get quite loud on this floor. And that's where people are ducking into to make calls. That's a terrible use of a conference room. And as a space and occupancy planner, that insight is really valuable to me to make better decisions. Now, I can look at this and it can collect billions of pieces of information, but AI is really the tool, being able to ask questions, just like a human would, and say, what is the average utilization of this space as compared to all of the other conference rooms on this floor, or maybe in this building, or on this campus, or compare our Chicago campus versus our New York campus, and tell me what the differences are in terms of the way these spaces are being able to utilize. You used to have to get someone to write a report to do that. Now AI can power that kind of answer very, very quickly. And then do really super complex things like this. This is the same data, but a heat map. Like, humans aren't very good at producing this kind of stuff instantaneously. We would have to, basically process millions of pieces of information and synthesize it really quickly. This kind of feedback is instantaneous, and what we're looking at is average utilization. And I can see the lower left part of this floor where it becomes yellow and red. That part of this floor is utilized more heavily than the upper right part of this floor. Real simple, being able to get that information back very quickly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about something called multi-data point analysis. And this is being able to take all of that traditional stuff that we use as space and occupancy planners and then add like 50 other kinds of data, or infinite kinds of, I'm just going to say 50 because that's an impressive number. What if we were able to take utilization data and look at things like, does utilization affect my energy use? Does utilization affect the temperature or indoor air quality of my spaces? Here's an interesting one, because I've got a slide on this. Does weather affect utilization? And it does. Intuitively, it makes sense. But when we look at data over time, our data science people took utilization over 2 years and they overlaid data from NOAA, the Oceanographic Administration data for weather data for that. And they made a direct correlation. When it's calling for rain or snow, utilization goes down. Makes sense. People are probably risk adverse and they don't want to come in. But when you start to power massive data sets and overlaying data like that, your building can start to make really smart decisions, such as, I know it's going to snow tomorrow. Let's say I'm in New York City or New England. Let's not bring the whole building up. Let's reduce parts of the building down to maybe a couple of floors because we know utilization is going to be low. Let's save money. And that's an interesting planning tool and something that you can take into account using what I call multi-data point analysis. That's utilization data, energy data, indoor air quality data, information about your assets, information about wait times in the break rooms, all of that, and bring it together so that when you're doing your scenario planning around where you're going to plan for the future of your space, you're doing it based upon really, really broad data sets that allow you to provide super interesting insights. I'm going to give you a couple of examples before I wrap up. Here's an interesting one: demographics and weather data. I just talked about this. This is showing a direct correlation between daily maximum temperature. This is temperature overlaid on top of utilization for a very long period of time. And it shows you that as temperature increases, utilization increases. Interesting data point. Who thought, right? Next one is dynamic restacking of maximum floor utilization and minimizing projected use. This, I find we've run some scenarios, and our data science and AI people have done this, where they've said, is it possible to take a building and look at utilization now and into the future and do things such as, I know on Fridays, this 13-story office building only is going to be at 15% utilization. Can I dynamically restack that building and only open the first couple of floors and turn the rest off? Not even send the elevators to those floors, because then I'm going to start to see massive energy savings and better efficiency. And it's also a better experience. People like to be around people. That's why they're going into the office, providing more energy. Even when utilization is low across the portfolio, you may be able to concentrate that into spaces. This is an example where we looked at energy models, or maximizing density and minimizing energy usage across a certain number of floors. Really, I think, fascinating stuff that we're only able to do with data science and AI. All right, the next one. Indoor air environmental factors and how they affect space choices. I love this one because I've dealt with this a little bit in some of the facilities that we have, but also talking to clients. I had a client who had a very large floor plate, and they produced 2 open office work areas. One of them was utilized massively, and the other one was a ghost town. No one was using it, and they couldn't quite figure out. They spent a lot of money to do this renovations as the result of space and occupancy planning, because they thought, well, we want these kinds of areas to be close to people. the number one criteria for why people picked one space versus the other was access to daylight. That was it. That seemed to be, in the absence of daylight, it seemed like people were making the decision. But one of the open office areas was on the south side of the building, and one was on the north. When people had light coming through the window on the south side, they gravitated there and they wanted to sit there. And that's an interesting factor. We're also seeing things such as occupancy loading affecting indoor air quality. We've got a conference room, we had one in our old facility that always felt stuffy. It didn't feel good. And when we put a sensor in, we realized anytime people were in there, the CO2 level was going way up, beyond healthy levels, and people start to feel fatigued. That kind of information is, I think, a superpower for you as a space and occupancy planner to be able to include that kind of rationalization in the decisions that you're making. The last one is actual energy uses versus actual utilization. This is a simple one. I think it's quite powerful to be able to say, does utilization affect my energy usage? If not, there's a lot of stories I have around this one, but I really believe that one of the ways we're going to get to our carbon footprint reductions, buildings use something like they produce something like 40% of the carbon output on the planet. It's low-hanging fruit for us to better optimize our facilities using utilization data and doing our space and occupancy planning around understanding that buildings are utilized at different times in different ways, and providing access to things like daylight is going to increase utilization. Really understanding that from a space and occupancy planner, I think, is absolutely imperative. And the way we're going to get there, unless you want to go down if you want to go down to the other end of the building and find an analyst who can write a report to you that may take weeks and weeks to get, and you're not sure if the data is correct. The way AI is popping up in our tools and the way it's going to be popping up in a number of solutions, including our own AI-based scenario planning this year, is going to be absolutely game-changing in terms of the way we operate our space planning processes within most organizations. So, Corey, with that, I think I have a couple of minutes over, but not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and take a deep breath and wrap it up.
Sounds good. Yes, we are over time. So I don't believe we had any questions come in, but we will, if you have any questions for Brian, please send them our way and we will be sure to get those to him and get answers back to you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We appreciate your coming and hearing from Brian, and we look forward to seeing you on our next Thought Leadership Web Forum. Thanks so much.
Always fun, Corey. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.